But know this, you have been marked for salvation. And here in the great city of Markham, you're safe, secure, and most of all, understood.
Hey people, Mark here, and welcome back. I know it's been a while for many of you because there hasn't been a ship breakdown or extended video or anything here for 2 months. But summer is here, so I am queer. Well, that would be the case either way. Let me rephrase. Halo videos are back. I spent all of March posting a video every day. I've probably brought this up on the channel at some point, blah blah blah. Not important. Today we are breaking down the Marathon class heavy cruiser. The cruiser seen in Halo 2 and various auxiliary Halo media, many people's favorite cruiser. I'll let you know what I think at the end. Please subscribe here, and if you're interested in weird, heavily edited, very good videos, please subscribe to my smaller channel, Mark the Crawler. Let's begin. First built in 2520 by Soviet Heavy Machinery, the Marathon-class heavy cruiser was built to replace the Halcyon-class light cruiser, which was largely suffering from excessive production costs and a lack of tactical viability, a mere 10 years after its debut. This seems to be something that most cruisers in the UNSC have in common. Dating back to the Valiant class debuted in 2493, it, as well as the Halcyon, would have excelled in space combat, but came up short in ground assaults, which would ultimately be the vast majority of engagements during the insurrection. This made it hard to justify costs, and the costs were exorbitant, don't get me wrong. It's not just the ground combat thing. These things were apparently extremely expensive. That's not even mentioning the fact that the Halcyon's primary armament was a single light coil Mac. The only cruiser Macs we know from before the Halcyon was brought into the mix were the 250 GE-1A heavy coil Macs on the Valiant class, and even the refit Diligence class cruiser, now demoted to light destroyer, had 2 Macs of unknown caliber or power, making the Halcyon at this point decades newer than either of those, but horribly underpowered. The cruisers would go on to play a key role during the Human Covenant War, but nonetheless, this shortcoming of the Halcyon would bring on the birth of the Marathon. Measuring at 1,192 meters and weighing 12 million tons, it's only 10 meters longer than the Halcyon, but weighs a million more tons, despite the light cruiser being 59 meters wider and 39 meters taller. I attribute this to the 191 centimeter thick titanium armor plating that reportedly can take a beating even from plasma weaponry, although it can be forgiven for not withstanding a sustained, point-blank fire from a super heavy plasma lance. The armor does seem to cover more of the ship, most notably these cowlings protecting the engines. While the Halcyon class was revolutionary and its refit version would play a key role in major engagements, even by 2552 the Marathon was considered one of the most powerful ships humanity ever built. Requiring a crew of 1,000 naval personnel and able to carry an indescript amount of Marines and ODSTs, the Marathon has the capability to deploy SOEV drop pods and up to 24 GATL-1 longswords. However, some rarer configurations of the class sacrifice some missile pods and all of its cargo space to make room for more hangar space for light craft, effectively turning it into a light carrier. I imagine this would lower their independent capability somewhat, increasing a fleet's fighter power but lowering its own self-defense viability, and increasing its dependence on fleet support vessels. The Marathon was popular among high-ranking officers to use as flagships, such as Fleet Admiral Joseph Harper and Vice Admiral Michael Stanforth. Late into the war, the UNSC was low on carriers, heavy carriers, Valiants, pretty much any powerful command vessel that's built to be a flagship. Marathons would likely be the most powerful ship any admirals could get their hands on. While the Marathon lacks the Valiant's complex command suite, it surpasses the super heavy cruiser's missile armament. The primary armament of the Marathon-class cruiser is its two 49 F9A1 Mac cannons. These would have been the most prevalent heavy Macs in the entire Navy because they were on the most prevalent ship to have heavy Macs. Everything less than a cruiser had a light coil Mac. The heavy Macs on the Marathon were apparently so useful that they would push them out the door with half-finished hulls just to make use of them. For ship-to-ship engagements, it utilizes its 6th century autocannons to deal what is probably considerably less damage than its cruiser colleagues, with more autocannons. Where it truly shines is its missile armament, as stated. 70 M58 Archer missile pods, 26 longbow missile pods, and 5 fusion rockets. Archer missile pods have a different amount of missiles per pod depending on what ship we're looking at, but if the Marathons have the same amount as the Halcyon, that is 20 per pod. The M40 longbow missile pod is a bit more of a mystery, found only on the Marathon class. We don't know anything about it or how many missiles are in each pod. Fusion rockets are typically considered inefficient due to poor performance against against shielded targets and a lack of a guidance system. They typically see use against stationary targets like space stations. 12 M810 Helix point defense guns are all the point defense this cruiser has, the least of any cruiser, leaving it comparably susceptible, if even a little bit, to fighters or missiles. If there are some sufficient supply ships or fleet support around, it may be extra worth it to sacrifice the cargo space and some extra missiles to make room for sabers or broadswords, which could act as some mobile fighter screening in lieu of more point defense. Marathon served all the way through the Human Covenant War, having been created only 5 years prior. By 2525, the Marathon was the most prevalent cruiser in the UNSC, and by 2552, only 20 cruisers still existed in the entire Navy, the majority being Marathons. They would have first encountered the Covenant at Harvest, as a part of Battle Group X-Ray led by Preston Cole, and we've discussed that before. There they engaged in combat with a single Razis pattern interdictor, and most, if not all of them, were likely destroyed. For the rest of Cole's military career and apparent life, he employed Marathons as a part of the 3rd Fleet, through the Harvest Campaign and the Battle of Arcadia. After Preston Cole's death, the 3rd Fleet would continue to fight on, later as a part of Home Fleet during the Battle of October 10th and the Battle of Earth. Many of you will already know the Harvest Campaign and the Battle of Arcadia were a part of the same conflict between the 3rd Fleet and the Fleet of Glorious Interdiction, led by Ripa Morami. The only named Marathon in the 3rd Fleet was the UNSC Prophecy, which participated in the Battle of Bliss before being destroyed at Harvest. Before then, Captain James Cutter was offered command of the ship, but refused in favor of a chance to command the Spirit of Fire. After the Battle of Bliss, the Prophecy recovered the black box of an Oni survey vessel, the UNSC Accra. The information on that black box was actually instrumental in securing a peace between the UNSC and prominent insurrectionists at the time to focus on the Covenant together. After sustaining heavy damage, the Prophecy was boarded by a Pelican carrying Sergeant Forge to evacuate survivors. Forge was directed by Serena to the nav system to delete the ship's navigation data per the Cole Protocol, a mandate given to protect the location of Earth and other colonies. The UNSC Dresden was a Marathon destroyed above Biko during the Battle of Biko. C-322 is the only identification given for a Marathon class that took part in the defense of Concord, alongside 2 Strident-class frigates in one of their earliest deployments. Together, the 3 ships secured a rare total victory for the UNSC, with several units on the ground, including Noble Team, mopping up the leftovers. The UNSC Leviathan was Vice Admiral Michael Stanforth's flagship, and this was actually a pretty important guy. Shortly after, then-Captain Jacob Keyes performed the Keyes Loop at Sigma Octantis 4 and sent a Covenant battle group packing all on his lonesome, leaving only a carrier to tell the tale after deploying landing craft onto the planet and running away. Leviathan arrived, leading a battle group of the same name. Battle Group Leviathan consisted of 48 vessels, 1 Marathon-class heavy cruiser, the aforementioned, Leviathan, 2 carriers, one of them being an Epoch-class heavy carrier, click up at the top right for that breakdown, and one being an unidentified type that we might have talked about before, I don't remember. Guys, it's been a while. 15 destroyers, 30 frigates, and 1 mobile refit station, the UNSC Cradle. After repairs were made to the UNSC Iroquois, 1,600 Marines led by General Kitts were sent to the planet to retake a city that I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name of, when the 2nd Fleet of Solemn Accord arrived. We don't know the composition of this fleet. As far as I can tell, the depictions of it are pretty different. It's shown in one piece of art from Halo mythos, if it is to be believed, and it is much smaller than its depiction in the comic Halo: The Fall of Reach Covenant. In the aftermath of the battle, the Covenant fleet consisted of 8 ships, and Battle Group Leviathan was reduced from 48 to 10. A strategic and costly victory, which is honestly pretty rare and a lot better than they usually do. I mean, the Coveys still learned the location of Reach and Installation 04 from this, though, so, I guess they actually won. Damn. After all that, they jumped to Reach, and upon the arrival of the fleet of Valiant Prudence in the Epsilon Eridani system, that's the fleet that had the Long Night of Soulless supercarrier in it, Stanforth would go on to lead the remainder of his own battle group, presumably supporting the forces on Tribute and Beta Gabriel, before returning to Reach for repairs and organizing the remainder of the Epsilon Eridani fleet once Thelvanam arrived, with his fleet of particular justice. The massive fleet annihilated the human forces, and Stanforth died in Reach's fall. The UNSC Hannibal was another Marathon destroyed during the fall of Reach. The Battle of October 10th is less well known and is actually very interesting. 10 days before the Battle of Earth, an unknown force was detected in the Sol system, broadcasting outdated civilian IFF codes. There were 12 of them, but once Battle Group Rhino, which was a part of the 3rd Fleet that we were talking about earlier, engaged those ships, 11 of them jumped out of the Sol system. In accordance with standing orders at the time, any ship not ID'd as friendly was to be destroyed, because the Covenant was on the way. After moving in, the UNSC Totem Lake, a carrier of unknown class, was destroyed with all hands after multiple hull breaches and boarding parties. Rhino disengaged and regrouped, later to be denied when requesting permission from Admiral Harper to re-engage. What's interesting about this is the attackers were never identified as Covenant. Whether insurrectionists or some unidentified species that just stumbled upon the Sol system, which would be unlikely considering these civilian IFF tags, or some hidden species observing the human Covenant war from the sidelines, we may never know. Because this lore came from a damn loot crate, canon and interesting nonetheless. The 5th Fleet was stationed at Earth as a part of the massive Home Fleet when the Covenant arrived on October 20th. It consisted of 8 Marathons and 67 Stalwart-class frigates, and was led by Fleet Admiral Harper. The fleet formed a defensive cluster around the Cairo, Athens, and Malta defense platforms upon the arrival of the Fleet of Sacred Consecration, which consisted of 2 Siphon-pattern assault carriers and 13 Ket-pattern battlecruisers. Now, if you're thinking, what a horrible job they did, 2 out of 3 of those defense platforms were obliterated by a tiny Covenant fleet that sent some boarding parties straight past them. Well, you're right, but also it does kind of make sense that a lot more boarding craft and small craft would be able to squeeze past a bunch of Marathon-class frigates because, as I said earlier, they do not have very good point defense weaponry. I mean, the M810 Helix point defense guns might be fine, but they only have 12 of them, and the ship is humongous. Now, that's not to say that the Stalwart-class light frigates, which have 6 M870 Rampart point defense guns and 52 M710 Bulwark point defense guns, shouldn't have been able to stop this, boarding craft swarm tactic. I mean, I don't know. And wouldn't the defense platforms have their own point defense guns? I mean, the Anchor Station had guns in Reach. I don't know. And did all of the boarding craft have these bombs on them? That seems expensive and excessive. Of the Marathons in the 5th Fleet, we know of the names of 3. The UNSC Canberra, Feeling Lucky, and Say My Name. Canberra was Harper's flagship. We don't know if he survived the Battle of Earth or not, or the ship did. Say My Name did survive the initial engagement we see in the mission Cairo Station in Halo 2. It actually served in the Harvest campaign earlier in the war, and Veronica Dare served on this ship prior to the events of Halo 3 ODST. My older subscribers have actually seen the interior of this ship quite a lot, as well as anybody who's played Halo 3 ODST. The Hell's Waiting Room of Say My Name, which is the name for the room where the Hell Jumpers drop from, was the very same briefing room that Alpha 9 was deployed from in the prologue of Halo 3 ODST, making the Marathon class one of very few ships we actually see the interior of in Halo. I used to use the ODST main background a lot in some of my older videos, which is what I meant by older subscribers would recognize it. We don't know if Say My Name survived the war once the Prophet of Truth's fleet arrived later. The UNSC Feeling Lucky, however, viewers of this channel would also be familiar with. Nonetheless, the 5th Fleet absolutely bodied the Prophet of Regret's little fleet, destroying most if not all of the Ket-pattern battlecruisers, taking down the shields of one of the carriers, allowing for Chief to do the thing, and forcing Regret to run away to Delta Halo to get punched. Around the same time, Battle Group Omicron, led by Admiral Carl Pearson and consisting of an unidentified carrier for a flagship, 1 Marathon-class heavy cruiser, 6 destroyers, and 1 Sahara-class prowler, broke off from Home Fleet on November 3rd, almost a month into the battle for Earth. Alright, so there's a lot of moving parts here. Listen up. When Installation 04 was activated, the one from Halo Combat Evolved, the Sentinels on the Forerunner shield world Onyx were activated, and started attacking UNSC forces and researchers there, including Dr. Halsey and the Spartan 3's Gamma Company, who were still in training. After the Sentinels destroyed the human ships in orbit, Halsey sent a distress signal to Earth, requesting Spartan deployment to Onyx. Cortana and some Covenant forces intercepted the message, however.
Could we possibly make any more noise?
And Cortana forwarded it to Fred, Linda, and William 043, who's not important, Spartan. They went on to go hijack Bloodied Spirit, which was a Sonaris pattern heavy destroyer, and jump to the shield world. The Sangheli Fleetmaster Voro Nar Manticree, who was recently promoted to Fleetmaster by Zaitan Jar Watinri, that big guy, was also ordered to go to Onyx and check out that interesting message. These two were not aligned with the Prophets anymore, but there was no alliance with the humans at this point just yet, so Zaitan was just thinking ahead, and he ordered Manticree to go secure Forerunner artifacts and eliminate the human human presence there. Taking 22 ships, he jumped to Onyx moments before the combined fleet of Righteous Clarity, which was the one he was just a part of, was obliterated by a Nova bomb accidentally activated by some Huragok. When they arrived, the Sentinels were still agitated, and destroyed a couple destroyers before Bloodied Spirit showed up. When he saw this, Manticree deployed ground forces to take out the Spartans, and to his credit, he actually left the ship to go take part in the battle on the ground. Soon after, though, Battle Group Omicron arrived. I can't really do the description of this battle justice. It's a really good one. Go read Ghosts of Onyx. But in the aftermath, Patterson's battle group took out 20 Covenant ships before a new Covenant fleet arrived and wiped them out, save for the Prowler, which was probably, able to sneak away. It's not a total human loss, though. Some Spartans, plus Dr. Halsey and Franklin Mendez escaped, and the Covenant fleet was destroyed by the trillions of Sentinels that emerged from Onyx later. After the war, most of the Marathons were decommissioned, following the debut of the Autumn-class heavy cruiser. Click up at the top right for a breakdown of that one if you'd like. Some stayed in service, however. I assume the ones that were, in perfect enough shape to where it'd be more costly and less cost-effective to dismantle them and try and make more Autumn classes with it. Although one key thing is that Autumn classes were much cheaper than Marathons, or Halcyons for that matter. In any case, one of which that stuck around took part in Operation Jovian Whistle, as the lead ship of a task force sent to the planet Gao to facilitate the investigation of a transmission believed to have been sent by a Forerunner AI. The Marathon was escorted by 5 ships, frigates, and destroyers, we don't know how many of each. And Gao is not a fan of the UNSC, but Arlo Casil, the president of the Gao Republic, is not stupid. He stayed his hand from any hostile action, because, it's the UNSC, and you're a single planet, and, Gao is one of very few human factions with any naval presence whatsoever, however meager it may be. GMOP, stands for Gao Ministry of Protection. GMOP patrol corvettes are custom ships made for the defense of Gao. I talked about them a little in my video on human corvettes. Click up there. Unfortunately for the planet's interests, Arlo had to concede that the entirety of Gao's fleet was hopelessly outgunned by a single Marathon-class cruiser. Some might say, well then why even have those ships if they suck so much? Well, I propose to you this scenario. You are tasked with defeating an M1 Abrams by yourself. You can either take on this threat with your bare hands, or take on this threat with a Glock 19 and 1 magazine. Your chances are not greatly improved, but they are improved. And that is the Marathon-class heavy cruiser. Not a whole lot on it, honestly. I thought that this script was a lot longer than it was when I started reading it, but I haven't done this in a couple months. I like it, but as I said before, the UNSC cruiser design is not my favorite looking motif that the humans have, but it's iconic, and I do think it looks like a marked improvement over the Halcyon-class design. That's just to say it looks more optimized, meaner, in-universe. I still have the Autumn class as my favorite, which is funny because I literally just said I prefer the Marathon to the Halcyon, and Autumn classes just use Halcyon class chassis, but whatever. The shield hull plating on the Autumn class is so cool to me, but this is probably my number 2. It has been 2 months since my last ship breakdown. I have been making videos on my smaller channel, Mark the Crawler, getting very, very good in the meantime. Please do subscribe over there. I have a ton of crazy shit planned. Some of you will find very interesting. I've been getting back into the swing of things, including this video, after a major depressive bipolar episode in April. Don't worry about it now, I'm good. And with my summer finally here, I'll be able to pump videos out like I love to do whenever I have any free time. I'm not going outside. But also keep an eye on Mark the Crawler, and possibly another channel if I can get it off the ground this winter, or fall, I guess. That's all I got for you, other than the Ecumen podcast. My Halo podcast, which is my attempt to learn how to do a podcast. I know people have been criticizing it, and I appreciate it, because it needs criticism. It really does, because I don't know what I'm doing. Some people are saying I need a co-host or a script. Hey, listen, I had a script. My delivery was just bad. But yeah, that is all I've got. Bye-bye.